What makes me unique? I mean, we're all one of one, so we're all unique. There's never going to be another one of me, and there's never going to be another one of anybody. And that's like a cool thing to think about.
Gauff just silenced every critic. What she did on this flight has the entire world in tears. Welcome back to Chatterbox, the channel where we bring you the stories that actually matter, the moments that remind you why certain people become more than athletes, they become icons. And today, we have one of those stories.
Parents to write like a parenting book. I mean, there are great parenting books from parents, but when you see a kid who turns out like that at 19, don't you wonder because...
One of those rare, beautiful, unscripted moments that no PR team planned, no sponsorship deal manufactured, and no highlight reel could ever do justice. This is real, this is raw, and by the time we're done here, I promise you, you are going to feel something. So buckle up, because we're about to take you somewhere at 30,000 feet, where tennis superstar Coco Gauff quietly did something so profoundly human, so deeply moving, that the entire tennis world scratched that. The entire internet has stopped scrolling and started paying attention. And trust me, in the year 2026, getting the internet to stop scrolling is practically a miracle in itself. Let's set the scene. Coco Gauff, Grand Slam champion, Olympic gold medalist, Forbes cover star, and one of the most recognizable faces in world sport, boards a commercial flight. Not a private jet. Not a chartered aircraft with a personalized menu and
crazy. I don't think it's digest. Like, even last night I was telling myself you're a Grand Slam champion, and I'm like, it doesn't feel real at all. I would think in the past it would have been more relief than joy, but I think with all the growth and maturity I've done, it's definitely more joy.
Being the world-class athlete and star that she is, had naturally been booked into first class. A wide seat, extra comfort. The works. The standard for someone of her stature who spends half the year crisscrossing continents to compete at the highest level of professional tennis. She had every right to that seat. Nobody would have blinked. Nobody would have thought twice about it. But Coco Gauff is not built like everyone else. And what happened next is the reason we're here today. As passengers settled into their seats and the usual pre-flight chaos unfolded, overhead bins slamming, babies crying, someone inevitably taking 17 minutes to stow their carry-on, Coco noticed something. Sitting further back in the cabin was an elderly man, a veteran, an American veteran, traveling alone, returning home from Europe, where he had made the deeply sacred journey of visiting the graves of his fallen comrades, soldiers who gave everything, who never made it home, who now rest beneath white crosses in foreign soil. Let that sink in for a second. This man had crossed an ocean not for a vacation, not for business, but to stand at the graves of brothers and sisters in arms. To pay his respects. To carry the weight of memory that only a veteran truly understands. And Coco Gauff saw him, really saw him. According to multiple witnesses on that flight, passengers who could not believe what they were watching unfold right in front of them, Coco didn't hesitate. She didn't call over a flight attendant and whisper a request. She didn't make a show of it. She simply got up, walked over to the veteran, and offered him her first-class seat. Just like that. Quietly, graciously, without fanfare. No cameras were rolling. No social media team was capturing the moment for content. It was just a young woman who saw an older man who deserved more comfort than he was getting, and she did something about it. The veteran, by all accounts, was stunned. You have to imagine this man's reaction. Here is a decorated American hero, a man who has lived through things most of us will never comprehend, being approached mid-flight by one of the most famous athletes on the planet, being told, essentially, please, take my seat. The humility of that gesture alone is enough to bring a lump to your throat. But wait, because the story doesn't end there. If it did, it would already be extraordinary. But Coco Gauff took it one step further, and this is the part, this is the moment, that has truly broken the internet and brought grown adults to tears all across the world. After the veteran had been settled into the first-class seat, after the logistics of the swap had been sorted out and things had quieted down, Coco made her way to where he was now sitting. She didn't stay away. She came to him, and she sat down beside him, leaned in gently, and began to talk with him. Not a quick hello, not a photo opportunity. She spoke with him. She listened. And then, in a gesture so small and yet so monumental that witnesses have described it as the single most moving thing they have ever seen on a flight, Coco reached out and carefully adjusted the small American flag pin on the veteran's jacket. She repositioned it. Gently, precisely, placing it neatly over his heart. Right there. Over his heart. Think about the symbolism of that for a moment. The flag. The heart. A young woman. A child of America herself. Someone who has carried her own flag on courts around the world. Placing that symbol of service and sacrifice directly over the heart of a man who gave years of his life in service of that very flag. It is the kind of moment that screenwriters try to create and almost never get right, because real life, when it chooses to be, is more poetic than anything we could ever script. And then Coco spoke. Softly. Her voice warm and full of genuine emotion. She thanked him for his service. Not the hollow, reflexive thank you for your service that gets tossed around so casually it sometimes loses its weight. No, this was different. Witnesses described her voice as breaking slightly, as though the emotion of the moment had caught up with her too, as though she was not just saying words, but meaning every single syllable from somewhere deep inside. And the veteran, this strong, stoic man who had stood at the graves of his fallen brothers across the Atlantic, who had held himself together through the weight of that grief, broke down. He was brought to tears. He reached up and touched the small pin that now rested over his heart, visibly overwhelmed, unable to speak. And Coco. She simply smiled. A quiet, warm smile. She gave him a gentle nod, the kind of nod that says everything without needing a single word, and she walked back to her seat. Her original seat. Economy class. No complaints. No fuss. Just Coco Gauff, sitting in the back of the plane, letting her actions speak louder than anything she has ever said in a press conference. Now, at this point, you might be wondering how the story got out, given that Coco herself clearly had no intention of publicizing it. And this is where the humanity of the story multiplies, because it wasn't Coco who shared it. It was the other passengers. People who were on that flight and could not keep what they had witnessed to themselves, not out of gossip, but out of genuine awe. Eyewitness accounts began circulating, and the story spread with the kind of organic momentum that only truly authentic moments generate. Because people can feel the difference between a staged publicity stunt and something real. And this was real. This was as real as it gets. The tennis world reacted swiftly and emotionally. Fellow players, commentators, and former champions flooded social media with messages of admiration. Veterans organizations shared the story widely, deeply moved that a figure of Coco's fame and youth would show such profound respect for those who served. American sports fans, many of whom have long celebrated Coco for her athleticism but perhaps not fully appreciated the depth of her character, were vocal in their praise, with many saying this single moment changed the way they see her entirely. But let's zoom out here, because there is a much bigger conversation hiding inside this beautiful story, and Chatterbox never shies away from the bigger picture. We live in an era of performance. A time where everything is content, where every gesture is calculated, where authenticity has become a brand strategy, and humility is something people perform for an audience. Athletes are public figures in a way that no previous generation of sports stars ever had to contend with, every move scrutinized, every statement analyzed, every silence interpreted. The pressure to manage image, to curate persona, to always be on, is relentless and exhausting. And within that environment, what Coco Gauff did on that plane is almost radical, because she did the right thing when nobody was watching. Or rather, she did the right thing without caring whether anyone was watching. That is character. That is not something you can coach or PR your way into. That is the product of upbringing, of values, of a genuine internal compass that points toward decency even when decency offers no reward. Coco Gauff's parents, Corey and Candy Gauff, raised her in the full glare of a prodigy spotlight, and somehow, impossibly, they managed to raise someone who, at the height of her fame, still sees the human being in the seat across the aisle. Let's also talk about Coco's journey, because context matters and it makes this moment even richer. She burst onto the global stage as a 15-year-old at Wimbledon, defeating her idol Serena Williams and sending shockwaves through the sport. The pressure on that teenager was immense, the expectations, the comparisons, the weight of what people decided she was supposed to be. She navigated all of it with a maturity that baffled sports psychologists and impressed veterans of the tour alike. When she finally claimed her first Grand Slam at the 2023 US Open, the tears she shed on that court were not just tears of athletic victory, they were the release of years of pressure, doubt, resilience, and relentless work. And since then, she has only grown. As a player, as a spokesperson for her generation, and evidently as a human being. She has spoken openly about her faith, about her mental health, about the responsibilities she feels as a young black woman competing at the highest levels of a historically exclusionary sport. She has used her platform to speak about social justice. She has mentored younger players. She has shown, repeatedly, that the court is not the only place where Coco Gauff competes with excellence. But all of those things, as meaningful as they are, happened in public. They happened with microphones and cameras, and the apparatus of modern celebrity around them. What happened on that plane happened in the quiet. And that is what makes it different. That is what makes it the truest expression of who she actually is. Now, we also want to take a moment, because this story deserves it, to think about the veteran at the center of this tale. We don't know his name. We don't know his branch of service, or which war he served in, or how long he wore the uniform. What we do know is that he traveled across an ocean, alone, to stand at the graves of people he loved, people who never came home. We know that he wore a small American flag pin on his jacket, perhaps placed there by a loved one, perhaps something he's worn every day for decades, perhaps a quiet personal tribute to those he lost. And we know that when a young woman placed that pin over his heart and thanked him, something cracked open inside him that he had perhaps been